that there are a bunch of things people think Death Note is about that it isn't about. So thing number one, Reno, that Death Note isn't about, that people seem to think it's about. It's not a cautionary tale about how power corrupts people. It's definitely not. Because, whenever you think about it, all of the people who oppose light are also very powerful. Only they represent real forms of power, right? Like, his dad is a police chief. L is just given a free reign by Interpol, and he has all this fucking money and stuff. And then you have Mello, and he's a crime lord. Nier is basically the leader of like an intelligence agency. Like, all of these other people are also in positions of power, and Light's power is made up. It would be like if you made a movie about why drugs were bad, and the main character does a drug that makes their head explode, and all of their friends do crack and meth and they're just fine. So, like, it's not a cautionary tale about how power corrupts, because all of the real world instances of power don't corrupt anybody. You could argue maybe that there's the idea that power reveals things, which it's like if you have the power to do things, if you had the power to do whatever you want, then you do whatever you want, which sort of fits in line with what Light does. It sort of fits in line with what L does, and that's a better, I think, interpretation. Another thing that Death Note isn't about is whether or not it's right to kill bad people. But the series almost immediately tells you this whenever L effectively executes somebody, gets somebody executed on live television, and he's like, this is a death row inmate. So, like, really what Light is doing is not technically that much different than what the Japanese government is already doing in the context of Death Note. They're already executing people. The question is not whether or not killing bad people is the right thing to do, because it seems like we're generally in agreement on that already. Also, Light accomplishes his goal, basically. Light's correct. Light's theory of crime is right. His theory that if you kill all of the criminals, crime goes down, is correct somehow. Light's theory of crime is wrong. That's not how crime works. You can't just kill all the bad guys and crime go down. But in Death Note, that's how it works. Naturally, Death Note is taking place in like this post-social, Margaret Thatcher, there is no society sort of world. That's the setting, and that was, that's the time. So that's sort of what's vibing, that's sort of what's going on there. And like they say, even within the show, that like whoever wins is right. And I think that like is literally, that's the whole thing. Like whoever wins is right. Like Light isn't particularly worse than the other people. Like sure, he's definitely, you could say he is, but like ideologically he doesn't represent anything that different from the people that he's opposed to. It's not an ideological battle. It's a battle for power. It's just about like Light wants to have power, and then this group of people want to keep power where it is. And that's it. There's not a lot of fundamental ideological disagreement there. It's just ego and like the dynamic of like power. It's a post-ideological conflict, sort of, I think. I guess Light, you could say, is posed as like an antagonist, and he's like an upset to the status quo. And that's bad, and that the good guys are obviously upholding the current order of things, and that current order of things is even said within the context of the series to be shitty, but there is no alternative. So that's sort of, I think, the logic there. I don't know. I think that that's interesting. I'm not here saying that you again, like, this doesn't matter as to whether or not Death Note is good or not. I'm not like making any sort of statement like that. I think Death Note's okay. Bakuman is, I would say, you could also say neoliberal, and it's like ideology, like, and it's, ideological leanings, but Bakuman's really good. Bakuman is sort of, there's a contrast between Death Note and Bakuman that I think is maybe interesting to point out, but probably is just a coincidence, where in Death Note very much feels like this sort of there is no alternative kind of rhetoric. Bakuman, a series that started running in Shonen Jump in 2008, which is kind of a significant year. 2008 is like the big recession, like the first big recession in like a while. And you know, Bakuman sort of feels like it's trying to sell neoliberalism more so than like Death Note. Is definitely a big fan of the idea of like the market and its relationship to art. Like it likes that. It likes that dynamic. And yeah, I mean, I would say that's like it's like a story, it's a pro-creative capital sort of story, I guess. And it feels like it's selling the idea. It feels like it's trying to sell that like idea. It romanticizes it a lot. Romanticizes this sort of grind kind of mentality. But Bakuman is pretty good. I still think it's very good. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like there's a shift in rhetoric. I don't think any of this stuff is conscious or anything like that. I don't think these ideas are intentionally written into the stories. But it's just a funny little thing I noticed, basically. That's what it amounts to. I don't know, though. Is that all I have to say about it? That might be. Sorry, I'm not very good at, like, off the top of my head thinking about how to structure these things in a way that's interesting. I'm just sort of rambling.